Are you certain? Wax asked, tugging at the cravat again. Indeed, my lord. He hesitated. I'll admit, my lord, that I've been curious about this for months. You're the first High Lord I've ever waited upon who could tie a decent cravat. I've grown quite accustomed to providing that assistance. And you learn to do things on your own when you live out in the roughs. With all due respect, my lord, Guillaume said, his normally monotone voice betraying a hint of curiosity, I wouldn't have thought that one would need to learn that skill in the roughs at all. I wasn't aware that the denizens of those lands had the slightest concern for matters of fashion and decorum. They don't, Waxillian said with a smile, giving one final adjustment to the cravat. That's part of why I always did. Dressing like a city gentleman had not effect on the people out there. Some immediately respected me, others immediately underestimated me. It worked for me in both cases. And, I might add, it was unspeakably satisfying to see the looks on the faces of criminals when they were hauled in by someone they assumed to be a well-dressed city dandy. I can assume, my lord. I did it for myself, too, Waxillian said more softly, regarding himself in the mirror. Silver cravat, green satin vest, emerald cufflinks, black coat and trousers, stiff to the legs and sleeves. One steel button on his vest among the wooden ones, an old tradition of his. The clothing was a reminder to him. The land around me may have been wild, but I didn't need to be. Waxillian took a silver pocket square from his dressing stand, deftly folded it in the proper style, and slipped it into his breast pocket. A sudden chiming rang through the mansion. Rust and ruin, Waxillian cursed, checking his pocket watch. They're early. Lord Harms is known for his punctuality, my lord. Wonderful. Well, let's get this over with. Waxillian strode out to the hallway, boots gliding on the green velvet-cut rug. The mansion had changed little during his 2-decade absence. Even after 6 months of living here, it still didn't feel like it was his. The faint smell of his uncle's pipe smoke still lingered, and the decor was marked by a fondness for deep, dark woods and heavy stone sculpture. Despite modern tastes, there were almost no portraits or paintings. As Waxillian knew, many of those had been valuable, and they had been sold before his uncle's death. Guillaume walked alongside him, hands clasped behind his back. My lord sounds like he considers this day's duty to be a chore. Is it that obvious? Waxillian grimaced. What did it say about him that he'd rather face down a nest of outlaws, outgunned and outmanned, than meet with Lord Harms and his daughter? A plump, matronly woman waited at the end of the hallway, wearing a black dress and a white apron. Oh, Lord Ladrian, she said with fondness, your mother would be so pleased to see this day. Nothing has been decided yet, Miss Grimes, Waxillian said as the woman joined the two of them, walking along the balustrade of the second-floor gallery. She did so hope that you'd marry a fine lady someday, Miss Grimes said. You should have heard how she worried all those years. Waxillian tried to ignore the way those words twisted his heart. He hadn't heard how his mother had worried. He'd hardly ever taken time to write his parents or his sister. And he had only visited that one time, just after the railway reached Weathering. Well, he was making good on his obligations now. 6 months of work, and he was finally getting his feet under him and pulling House Ladrian, along with its many forge workers and seamstresses, from the brink of financial collapse. The last step came today. Waxillian reached the top of the staircase, then hesitated. No, he said, I mustn't rush in. Need to give them time to make themselves comfortable. That is, Guillaume began, but Waxillian cut him off by turning it away and marching back along the balustrade. Miss Grimes, Waxillian said, are there other matters that will need my attention today? You wish to hear of them now? She asked, frowning as she bustled to keep up. Anything to keep my mind occupied, dear woman, Waxillian said. Rust and ruin. He was so nervous that he caught himself reaching inside his jacket to finger the grip of his Immoretta 301. It was a fine weapon, not as good as one of Renette's made, but a proper and small sidearm for a gentleman. He decided he would be a lord and not a lawman, but that didn't mean he was going to go about unarmed. That would just be plain insane. There is one matter, Miss Grimes said, grimacing. She was the Ladrian House steward and had been for the last 20 years. We lost another shipment of steel last night. Waxillian froze on the walkway. What? Again? Unfortunately, my lord. Damn it, I'm starting to think these thieves are targeting only us. It's only our second shipment, she said. House Tekiel has lost 5 shipments so far. What are the details, he asked. The disappearance, where did it happen? Well, no, don't tell me. He raised a hand. I can't afford to be distracted. Miss Grimes gave him a flat look, since that was probably why she avoided telling him about it in the first place. Waxillian rested a hand on the railing and felt his left eye twitch. Someone was out there, running an organized, highly efficient operation, stealing the contents of entire rail cars. They were being called the Vanishers. Perhaps he could poke around a little and... No, he told himself sternly. It's not my duty, not anymore. He would go through the proper authorities, perhaps hire some guards or personal investigators. He would not go chasing bandits himself. I'm sure the constables will find those responsible and bring them to justice, Waxley said with some difficulty. Do you think that's long enough to make Lord Harm's wait? I think that's been long enough. It hasn't been too long, has it? Waxley turned and walked back the way he'd come. Tillon rolled his eyes. Waxley reached the stairs. A young man in a green Ladrian vest and a white shirt was climbing up them. Lord Ladrian, Kip said. Post has arrived. Any parcels? No, my lord, the boy said, handing over a signet-sealed letter as Waxley passed. Only this looked important. An invitation to the Ahlstrom wedding dinner, Miss Grimes guessed. Might be a good place to have your first public appearance with Miss Harms. The details haven't been decided, Waxley protested. Sets for these matters. You do realize that I'm 42 years old. Young master doesn't exactly fit any longer. She patted his cheek. Miss Grimes considered the man to be a child until he was married, which was terribly unfair considering that she had never married. Right then, Waxley said, turning and striding toward the sitting room. Into the maw of the beast I go. Limmy, head of the ground floor staff, waited by the doorway. She raised her hand as Waxley approached, as if to speak, but he slid the dinner party invitation between two of her fingers. Have an affirmative response drafted to this, if you would, Limmy, he said. Indicate I'll be dining with Miss Harms and her parents, but hold the letter until I'm done with my conference here. I'll let you know whether to send it or not. Yes, my lord, but it's all right, he said, pushing the door open. I mustn't keep the... Lord Harms and his daughter were not in the sitting room. Instead, Waxley found a lanky man with a round, sharp-chinned face. He was about 32 years of age and had a few days of stubble on his chin and cheeks. He wore a wide-brimmed, rough-style hat, the sides curving up slightly, and had on a leather duster. He was playing with one of the palm-sized upright clocks on the mantel. Hello, Wax, the man said brightly. He held up the clock. Can I trade you for this? Waxley swiftly pulled the door shut behind him. Wayne, what are you doing here? Looking at your stuff, mate, Wayne said. He held up the clock appraisingly. Worth what? 3 or 4 bars? I've got a bottle of good whiskey that might be worth the same. You have to get out of here, Waxley said. You're supposed to be in Weathering. Who's watching the place? Barrow. Barrow? He's a miscreant. So am I. Yes, but you're the miscreant I chose to do the job. You could have at least said for Miles. Miles? Wayne said. Miles is a right horrible human being. He'd rather shoot a man than bother to actually find out if the bloke is guilty or not. Miles keeps his town clean, Waxley said, and he saved my life a couple of times. This is beside the point. I told you to watch over Weathering. Wayne tipped his hat to Waxley. True, Wax, but you ain't a lawkeeper no longer. And me, I've got important stuff to be about. He looked at the clock, then pocketed it, and set a small bottle of whiskey on the mantel in its place. Now, sir, I need to ask you a few questions. He pulled a small notepad and pencil from inside his duster. Where were you last night at around midnight? What does that... Waxley was interrupted by chimes sounding at the door again. Rust and ruin. These are high-class people, Wade. I've spent months persuading them that I'm not a ruffian. I need you out of here. Waxley walked forward, trying to usher his friend toward the far exit. Now, that's right suspicious behavior, isn't it? Wayne said, scrawling something on his notepad. Dodging questions, acting all anxious. What are you hiding, sir? Wayne, Waxley said, grabbing the other man's arm. Part of me is appreciative that you've come all this way to aggravate me, and I am glad to see you, but now is not the time. Wayne grinned. You assume I'm here for you. Don't you think that's a pinch arrogant? What else would you be here for? Shipment of foodstuffs, Wayne said. Railway car left Ellendale 4 days ago and arrived in Weathering with the entire contents of a single car empty. Now I hear you recently lost 2 shipments of your own to these vanishers. I've come to question you. Right suspicious, as I said. Suspicious? Wayne, I've lost 2 shipments. I'm the one who got robbed. Why would that make me a suspect? How am I to know how your devious criminal mind works, mate? Woodset standing outside the door. Maximilian glanced at the door, then back at Wayne. Right now, my criminal genius mind is wondering if I can stuff your corpse anywhere that wouldn't be too obvious. Wayne grinned. The door opened. Waxley spun, looking as Limmy sheepishly held the door open. A corpulent man in a very fine suit stood there, holding a dark wooden cane. He had mustaches that drooped all the way down his thick neck, down to his thick neck, and his waistcoat framed a deep red cravat. "Saying it doesn't matter whom he's seeing," Lord Harms said. "He'll want to speak with me. We had an appointment, and..." Lord Harms paused, realizing the door was open. "Ah!" He strode into the room. He was followed by a stern-looking woman with golden hair fixed in a tight bun, his daughter, Steris, and a younger woman that Waxilium didn't recognize. "Lord Ladrian," Harms said, "I find it very unbefitting to be made to wait. And who is this you're meeting with in my stead?" Waxilium sighed. "It's my old uncle," Wayne said, stepping forward, voice altered to sound gruff and lose all of its rural accent. "I'm his uncle, Marksil. Popped up unexpectedly this morning, dear man." Waxilium raised an eyebrow as Wayne stepped forward. He'd removed his hat and duster and had plastered his upper lip with a realistic-looking fake mustache with a bit of gray in it. He was scrunching up his face just slightly to produce a few extra wrinkles in the eyes. It was a good disguise, making him look like he might be just a few years older than Waxilium, rather than 10 years younger. Waxilium glanced over his shoulder. The duster sat folded on the floor beside one of the couches, hat atop it, a pair of dueling canes lying crossed beside the pile. Waxilium hadn't noticed the swap. Of course, Wayne had naturally done it while inside a speed bubble. Wayne was a slider, a Vendaloy allomancer, capable of creating a bubble of compressed time around himself. He often used the power to change costumes. He was also twin-born, like Waxilium, though his ferrochemical ability, healing quickly from wounds, wasn't so useful outside of combat. Still, the two powers made a very potent combination. "Uncle, you say?" Lord Harms asked, taking Wayne's hand and shaking it. "On the mother's side," Wayne said. "Not the Ladrian side, of course. Otherwise, I'd be running this place, eh?" He sounded nothing like himself, but that was Wayne's specialty. He said that 3/4 of a disguise was in the accent and the voice.